This presentation is about wall substructure. Sub meaning under and structure meaning what something is made of. So it can be really complicated, like the picture on the screen right now. But the good news is you don't have to learn all those things in this class. I just want you to know that it can get pretty complicated. So if you're interested in this, you might consider construction classes and architecture and engineering classes too, because they definitely get more complicated with it than interior design. But as an interior designer, you still need to know things that walls can be made of, because clients can ask for certain needs in their home. So one thing that you can make walls out of is plaster, and that is an older material. It was basically all walls were made up out of until around the 1950s, because we didn't know any better. Pretty much, we didn't have drywall and sheetrock until then. So, but you can still use it now if you like the way it looks. Like if you want to get the look of the texture in the bottom picture, using plaster is one way to do that. So the way it's applied is you use lath boards, which are these little strips of wood in this picture, and then you like layer the plaster on it, like smear it with a trowel on the wall, kind of like icing on a cake in a way, if you want to think of it. It's very thick, and it's very helpful for noise reduction, and it is fire resistant. So those are very much positive. It's very heavy, and it's messy to apply because it's like literally like icing, like big giant jugs of icing, and you just don't have to apply it to your wall. Whereas we'll see in a second that drywall is way easier, not messy. Well, it is messy, but not near as bad. So that is plaster. A lot of the walls in the school have plaster on them, because this school is pretty old. So like in my classroom, if you are an 8A, B-Day kiddo, you could look at the wall that has the clock and the door to my classroom on it, and it is made of plaster. There's one wall made of plaster in my room, and you can hardly tell the difference, except for it's got some lumps in it. The next type is basically the more up-to-date version of plaster. We call it drywall. It's also known as gypsum board, or you may have heard it called sheetrock. Sheetrock is actually a brand of drywall, or gypsum board, but like some people call hot tubs jacuzzis. Well, jacuzzi is just a brand of hot tub. Same thing. Sheetrock is just a brand of drywall. So basically, it's just a big old sheet of pressed gypsum, which is a mineral powder, that is covered in 2 layers of really, really thin paper, kind of like cardboardish paper. So it comes in these big sheets like this, if you've ever noticed them at like Lowe's or Home Depot or Builder's First Source. And they're not very expensive. It's really easy to repair. Like you don't have to hire somebody to help you repair it. You could do it on your own at home, but sometimes it looks a little bit like you didn't know what you were doing if you try to do it yourself. So if you've got some good technique, then you're fine. But people do apply drywall and fix drywall as a profession. So it's basically like a big puzzle. It's really interesting. So this top picture, like everywhere that you see a rectangle of gray is where they've taken one of these sheets of drywall and put it on the wall. So like that is a sheet of drywall. Next to it's another sheet of drywall and another sheet of drywall. So they will screw it to the studs, which are like the bones of the house, the wood pieces that are inside of the walls, and then they tape with drywall tape these pieces together, and then they smear what we call mud. It's not like literal mud, it's special drywall mud, kind of like plaster, over those seams where they taped them together, and it's just like a big puzzle piece. It's really interesting. So up here I have a little question. Since drywall has layers of paper on the outside, what are some potential problems? And your hint there is paint. So I'm going to tell you, since we're not going to discuss this in class, paint is a liquid, right? Well, what happens when you put liquid on paper? It crinkles up. So if you were to put paint, just normal paint, directly on drywall, it's going to crinkle up. You're going to get like ripples in your drywall, and that would look awful. So the solution here is to use a special drywall primer in thin layers to put a coating on the drywall before you paint it. Like, you have to do that or it might crinkle. And I don't know what is in special drywall primer that makes it not crinkle the wall, but regular paint would crinkle the wall. But it works somehow. I'm just going to say it's magic, just like the other day. There are different types of drywall sometimes if needed. So this type is called paperless drywall, or sometimes it's called blue board, but it's not always blue. Like I've seen it be orange before. Like we put this orange one in our shower, and it's basically for wet areas of the home, like a shower or a tub, because there is drywall behind a shower. If you never tore out a shower, just know it's back there. It has to be in the wall. So usually they use fiberglass instead of paper, because that paper is going to get wet and it's going to hold on to the wetness. And then, as we know, when something stays wet, it gets moldy. So if it's made of fiberglass instead, that won't happen, hopefully. So it just doesn't have paper on it. So it's a pretty good idea to use that in areas where it could get wet. It could also be like in a kitchen, laundry room also. So just know that it's sometimes called blue board, but it's not always blue. I guess it was probably just blue when they first made it, so it got that name. I'm going to assume that's what happened. Another type of drywall is fire-resistant wallboard, and it just has a special pink coating on it. I don't know if it's always pink, and it's not called pink board, but and it makes it fireproof, which is really neat. They use chemicals and glass fibers to do whatever they do on the outside. So if you had like this type of wallboard or drywall between two rooms in your house, if your house happened to catch on fire, then in theory, the fire would be contained in that one room where it started and would not spread to the other parts of the homes, because this type of wallboard would stop it. It is more expensive, but it's not going to be like crazy expensive. So in a way, like in theory, if you built your whole house out of fire-resistant wallboard, it could potentially like save your house from burning down one day if it ever caught fire. So that might be something to consider one day. Building codes. We keep hearing the word building codes every now and again. Building codes require that you have to use fire-resistant wallboard in between homes with a connected wall, such as a duplex. And we've not learned about duplexes yet, but we will. But I can go ahead and explain them. It's basically kind of like apartments, but there's only two of them, not like a whole bunch of them in an apartment building. Du meaning like double, or du like the French version of two. It's like two little houses stuck together in the middle. They share one wall. So that's a duplex. And the reason why you want to put fire-resistant wallboard in the wall of between the two duplexes is so that, like, if you're my neighbor and I catch my duplex on fire, so that I don't burn your house down too on accident. That's the theory there, because they share a wall. Now, done with wallboards, let's talk about types of masonry. Masonry covers several different things. Brick, stone, or cinder block can all be types of masonry. You might think that masonry only talks about brick, but it doesn't. It covers all three of those: brick, stone, or cinder block. You could be a brick mason, a stone mason, or a concrete mason. Any of that is masonry. Any type of masonry is going to be very, very stable, but it's not easy to change, which could be a good or bad thing depending on, how flighty you are. It's expensive, but that's because it's good quality. Masonry has to be installed by a skilled mason. Like you can't just like install a wall of brick, stone, or cinder block if you don't know what you're doing, because it holds up an entire house. Like it's used as a foundation. So like this picture is probably what, if you have a basement, your walls in your basement might look like this, just a bunch of cinder blocks, and they're holding up your entire house. So you don't want just some random Joe off the street to do that. You need someone who knows what they're doing. But if you're using it as a wall inside your home, like for decoration, like this stone wall or this brick wall, um, it can have a good rustic or industrial feel. When we think of like industrial loft, we really think of these like old brick walls that are like original to an old building. Um, Masonry is often used on fireplaces or to create an accent wall or focal point like this. It makes a lot of emphasis in a room. There is one of your principles of design. All right. Acoustic panels and soundproofing. This is something that a client could very specifically ask for. If you are asked to design a recording studio, or if someone wanted to design a shop attached to their house where they're going to be using lots of power tools or revving up motors, and they wanted to soundproof that away from their house so they could work at night while their family is sleeping, for example, or vice versa. You were designing the house, not the shop part, and you needed to make the wall that connects the house to that loud room, like the shop, soundproof, then this is something that you should know about as an interior designer, as this is one of your options that you could do. It's a really good idea. So there's two things. There's acoustic panels, which is this, and there's soundproofing, which is this. And the difference here is acoustic panels you add like after the fact. Like you converted a room to a movie theater like this, and you put these panels on the wall because the room is already built. Soundproofing you have to do during the construction. So in this picture, you can see they have put a special material, special caulk, special insulation, the special soundproofing board, and a special thick drywall and more caulk. Those are just materials inside of the wall to make it actual soundproof. So if your walls are already built and then you decide, I'm going to change this bedroom into a recording studio after my kid leaves home, you would have to tear the whole wall out and put soundproofing inside of it and build the wall back. So that's not as cheap, that's not as easy, but it's more effective than the acoustic panels like up here. So it also would be like a really cool idea to put soundproofing between bedrooms or between like your living room and your bedroom. I've talked many times about like how you might not want your TV to be really loud when people are trying to go to sleep, but if you had a soundproof wall between your living room and your bedrooms, problem solved. And you could put your private zones and your social zones of your house really close to each other with a soundproof wall. So there's ways to get around things like that, and soundproofing is one of them. And that is it for these slides. So those are things that walls can be made of. We call it wall substructure. Wall substructure.